What year did you come to the Aitkin County?
July 15th, 1915.
Where did you come from? Where did you live before you came
I
here?
lived out Hornick, Iowa.
Hornick, Iowa?
Near Sioux City.
Near Sioux City. And you moved here as a young lad then?
Yeah, I had figured bush rat here when I came here.
Where did you first live when you came to Aitkin County?
Half a mile south of Rossburg.
And that was in what year?
That was 1915.
You went to school then in the Rossburg area?
Oh, I was out of school when I came up here. Then I got boosted up. Yeah. No, I never went to school in Minnesota.
What year did you start working for the state or as a forester?
Well, I started in September 1921.
1921, but you worked in the woods before that.
Yes, more or less all my life.
What was your occupation before that?
Well, mostly on a farm, working in the woods and so forth. And
Just a minute, Herman. You were working for the Sioux Line during the 1918 fire. Could you tell us a little bit about that fire, Herman?
I will. In the afternoon of October 12th, 1918, the country was full of smoke. You couldn't see over half a mile. And about 3 o'clock that afternoon, the freight came in from the range over here, and we had engineer and some flat cars, 3 flat cars with water barrels on, and I think about 6 box cars. He came in, he picked us up. He said they got a fire up towards Lawler, so we took off for that, and we didn't get up there until about 4:30, 4:45. And the whole town was burning at that time, except the depot and the schoolhouse. The schoolhouse was made out of metal.
This was the town of Lawler now.
That's Lawler. And so we had about 230 people in that schoolhouse, and the doggone walls was so hot you couldn't put your hands on them. So we got those out of there and loaded them off the train, backed up to East Lake, cut the train off, went back into Lawler, and picked up 8 more people there, and the depot burnt while we were there. And all the other buildings were gone except that old schoolhouse, and that was metal, it wouldn't burn. And we tried to get through to Tomba and Kettle River, but the bridges were out over there, and we couldn't get east. And that whole country was on fire. And that was when, from there on, that fire went through, clear on through to Moose Lake, and cleaned up Moose Lake. And actually, I think that fire covered about 235 acres.
The bridges were burned out.
The railroad bridges burned out. Crushed.
How did you get from Lawler then over towards Moose Lake, or did you?
We couldn't. And the road coming down from the highway, which is 210 now, there was a bunch of cars up in that country there. Everything was on fire up there. Everybody was trying to get out of the country, and they was trying to outrun the fire. And they came down through the Kettle River area there, and there's a bad curve on the Dead Moose River down there, and there was 26 cars went into that gully down there, and there was 26 dead people in the cars.
26 people died on that curve because they run off the road. Couldn't see where they were going because of the smoke and the ashes.
And then from there on, I don't know what happened up there, but we pulled back into Aitkin. That was during the flu season. So we had to find room for all these 230-some people that we brought into Aitkin. And the town of Aitkin was in danger. It was almost burnt too. If it hadn't been for that new ditch that they dug on the west side of town here, part of Aitkin would have probably burnt. And north of Aitkin here, that bog up there north of the Peterburg corner, that was all burning. Then up north of us, we had what we called the Bain Fire, and that started up there, and that burnt across and east, jumped the Willow, and also jumped the Mississippi River. That burned about 50,000 acres. And then up Cloquet, their fire started right in the wood yard up there, jumped the river into the town and burnt the town, ran through, and I don't know how far east that went, but they still had fires in Duluth too, around Duluth.
This is all from what you call the 1918 fire now. So in other words, you're telling me that there was more than one spot that was on fire.
There was hundreds of fires burning in the country here. And the trouble always was, there was so many of these fires all finally got into being one. But there was hundreds of peat fires in the country all over. When that wind came up, there was clocked up there near Duluth at 90 miles an hour. And so but that was what it was. Actually, the 1908 fire was just a series of hundreds of small fires that finally all got together and became one fire.
Tell them about the exposure to the air from that.
Well, we were in Waller that night there's so much gas from the pine and balsam spruce in there. It sounded like a dynamite going off up there. You'd see a flash of lightning, it looked like lightning in the clouds, and the smoke clouds, and it just boomed, just like that, just like thunder,
Gas coming out.
That was gas burning from the smoke, right?
Yeah, that was gas from that fire.
Okay, Herman, you mentioned that there was a flu epidemic at the same time, and you moved 200 and some people into Aitkin. Where did you put all of these people when you moved them into Aitkin?
As far as I know, the biggest area of them were quartered down at the schoolhouse. That was kind of a hospital there at the time for the flu epidemic, too. They had a lot of people in there, no hospital, so they moved them all into the school down there and put cots in there and took care of them. And they were dying off like flies around here,
They were fed and bunked right there at the school, and that's the old school that was just... How long a time did you actually spend fighting the fire in 1918? Days, months, or a year, or whatever it might be?
We didn't fight the fire very long after that. It's around it was a week or so after the big fire went through. They were practically done with the fire. It was all under control. That was as far as it ever went. But they're out. We had to go out here and there, like on west of town there. We had peat fires under the railroad grade over there. We finally went down and dug them all out and burnt out those big pockets there on the west of the town there, and where those water holes are there.
Did snow or rain come to fall then, or stop some of that, or?
Well, I don't remember when we got rain, but we must have got rain later on in October, because we didn't have any more fires after that big fire, because there wasn't anything left to burn.
In other words, you're telling me that the fire actually, other than the peat fires, had burnt itself out.
A lot of them did, yeah. After the wind went down, well, the fire slowed down, and then the natives down in there finally managed to take care of them. Down south of the Lawler there, that fire didn't go too far south there, about 5 miles south of Lawler, and that was as far as it ever went. But the ones over east that went through Moose Lake and down in there, that went almost down to Sturgeon Lake. Jumped the Moosehorn River down there in several places. In fact, the fire even jumped Moose Lake when the fire burned at Moose Lake. The shingles and stuff across the lake started a lot of spot fires there.
This, by far, then, in your experience firefighting and working with the forestry and all of this, was probably the worst fire that you've ever seen then?
That was the worst one I was ever into. a lot of them years later, but nothing like that.
In 1918, during this fire, you were actually working for the railroad then. Then in 1921, you say you started with the forestry?
I started the forestry up here in the Spencer Bog. Should have worked on the fire up there.
Tell us a little bit about your working days after you started with the forestry and on through the history that you have. Just give us a running account.
To start out with, primarily our first jobs were as fire prevention, firefighting, and seeing that the lumber companies cleaned up their slush. That was our main duties. And there was also an educational program went along with it. We talked to schools and different meetings and stuff like that, fire prevention. But as we went along, they kept adding this and that and one thing and another to us. So finally we had the whole works on our lap. We had all the timber sales, scaling, and took care of all the state land. We had that thrown in our laps.
Catch the guys that were stealing timber.
Huh?
Catch the guys that were stealing timber.
Oh, yeah. And in the old days there, we had, of course, as usual, we had a lot of timber thievery and stuff like that, especially during the hard years of the 30s when they couldn't get a job for love nor money. And everybody could get around to it and cut a couple of cords of wood and go to Cloquet with it and buy a little sugar and salt and so forth, flour. That's the only income they had.
That's what they used to call the long egg sandal.
Yeah, that's right.
Long egg sandal.
You told us, or I've heard you tell stories about when you'd go out in the morning and probably have to stay out in the woods overnight and never get back in for maybe a day or two.
Well,
tell us some of them.
I used to leave home here at 8 o'clock on Monday morning, and I'd probably get back home Saturday afternoon.
And this was most of the time you were on foot.
I was on foot all the time, average 25 miles a day or more. And if night caught me and I could make it, I'd find some pothole lake someplace to always carry a fish line around my hat, you know. And I'd get myself a couple of sunfish and a crappie, build me a little bonfire, and cut a few balsams and make me a bed, and then I'd camp for the evening, you know. But, yeah, I enjoyed it.
That's a little different than if you were going to go camping today. You would have to have a lot more equipment than what you had.
You could probably get by with just as much then now as I could then, but nowadays you got to have your sleeping bag, you got to have this, and you got to have that. But now, in those days, that's all you had was what a little pack on your back, and that's all you carried.
When you were out for these days, or like you say, from Monday to Saturday, what actually were you doing out in the woods?
Generally just covering the territory, seeing how everything was going along, visit with the natives, going in my fire prevention program. And I'd start here and I'd go up maybe through Blind Lake area and wind up the county line up to where Cecil Graingartner used to live. And I'd take that road into Maine, or else I'd go on through and go over the road and go into Swat-Terra for the night. The next day, I'd cut east to Swat-Terra, make a big circle in the east. I'd wind up in Palisade. Probably the next night, I'd either be in Tamarack or Lawler.
Did you take these trips in the wintertime too, as well as summertime, just summertime?
Mostly all summer. But in wintertime, when we had timber, later on in years there, when we were handling the timber and stuff, well, then you used to make the lumber camps and stuff like that, you know, travel on snowshoes from one camp to another, check out to see, do the scaling for them and that.
What did you do with the mosquitoes and deer flies and horse flies when you were out in the woods all summer?
You just lived with them, that was all. But the only cure that I could ever find, and the best cures I ever find, get the smokiest doggone piece of bacon rind you could get and rub that on your neck and hands and arms, and they wouldn't bother you. Deer flies, of course, they were bound to bother, but mosquitoes, black flies wouldn't touch it.
You should probably have had that patented so you could sell a lot of that today.
Well, that's, but otherwise, it was a healthy life.
Apparently it was a healthy life. You're still here. Did you ever get tired of walking as much as you did?
It never bothered me.
It never bothered you?
Never bothered me, cripes. My average hiking time when I was out all by myself was about 5 miles an hour.
This is what I was going to ask.
And
about 5 miles an hour.
Nobody liked to work with me, so they said they couldn't keep up. Well,
you couldn't run that fast.
No, I'd have an awful time running behind you.
I had an Angus stride for a person my size of anybody that walks. For the full 36 inches every step I took. Of course, I was stepping the same number of steps anybody else was behind me, but they were taking about a 30-inch step, so they were falling back all the time, you know. The big trouble was everybody said they had to work with me. They didn't want to work with me because they couldn't keep up.
During this 1918 fire, when you brought all of these people back into Aitkin, Did you ever get the flu?
No.
You never got the flu?
Yeah, I got the flu in about, what the heck was it, about the start of World War II. That only lasted a day or two. I broke that right away. I felt it. But I had a high fever and all that. But
Being you could walk so fast, you probably walked away from the flu.
well, during the flu time, we had that. We lived up in Rossburg at that time when the worst part of it was on. And I and another young lad up there, we practically took care of the whole darn neighborhood up there. We used to go and milk their cows and haul water in and went to the store and got grub for them and hauled it back out to the farm. Tried in with them all the time, and neither one of us got it. We were just...
Do you, Herman, do you contribute your good health and long life to eating a certain kind of food or certain foods? Or?
No, heck, as far as my appetite was, I could eat anything that was eatable as far as that goes. It never bothered me what I ate or anything else. Of course, we didn't have all these fancy prepared foods in those days that they have now, because crepes, you'd go to restaurants or a hotel or something like that, like in Swatara and Palisade. Heck, they just serve it out like you serve it at home. You put it on the table and you help yourself.
When you were out hiking and going through doing all this walking, you must have carried some food and water along with you, didn't you?
I never carried any water with me because I always could find that. But
in other words, you drank from whatever you could find.
Well, I used to go in a cedar swamp and kick a hole in the moss and pull a handkerchief down there and drink that water. That was just as doggone good as any spring water you ever saw.
Do you think the Department of Health would go along with that today?
They wouldn't today, no, I'll tell you. Probably wouldn't. But, heck, I've stomped a hole in the swamp a lot of times.
You just drink the water that was available?
Yeah.
Did you ever shoot a deer or anything along the route like that? Did you carry a gun?
I carried a pistol that is, some of the trips I used to make, I always carried a pistol with me at certain times to come in kind of handy. So, some of those bushwhackers were a little bit salty, so you knew what you were running up against before you got there.
Can you give us just one experience you had out in the woods like that might be interesting?
Well, we had down in the Finn country one time, there was one going to carve me up with a double-bladed axe, but he didn't. I shot the handle off his axe.
Well, why was he mad at you?
Well, he wasn't mad at me. His understanding was that they chased one of the rangers out of there a couple of days before that, you know. Well, heck, I didn't know anything about the deal. He called me from the head office and wanted to know if I could go over there and check that trespass out. I said, what's the matter with the guy's blood? Well, he says he's got another job someplace and can't get down there. Well, he was the one they chased out. And he didn't want to go back down in there with him. So I did. And heck, I went down there. Nobody around home. I picked up their trail down in the woods. And here was the old man and his three big overgrown sons, all 6 foot and better, cutting pupwood. I said, what are you doing in here? I said, this happens to be state land. You ain't got any business in. The youngest one of the jumps, the others never said a word. This young punk, he was kind of cocky. He had a double-bitted axe in his hand. Yeah, he said, one of you guys, rangers, were down here the other day, and he says, we run him out of the woods. And I said, what's going to happen if I don't run? He started walking toward me and took the axe up like that. He said, if you don't go, he said, we'll leave you here. And I said, yeah, me, you, and who, somebody else. I said, and he took about 2 more steps, and I said, you've gone just far enough. And I flipped that old Super 38 off from under my shoulder holster. I dropped that down, and he pulled his hand back, and I shot the handle off just about that far above his fingers. Boy, that changed the situation right there. He turned just about as white as the snow was. And I said, no, the next one out of this thing is going to be right square between your eyes. And I said, this is the end of this monkey business. And I told him, I said, pile that damn wood up, and I'll measure it. And I said, you can pay me the trespass on it. And so the boys, they all, after they got everything ripped up, the old man stayed around there. And he talked with him a while, and the kids went to his house. And I poked him ahead of me going to the house, so I figured one of the darn because you might shove a 30-30 out the window and take a pot shot at me coming in. But no, we got in there. They were sitting around the table drinking coffee. So I figured out his bill and everything, told him what it was. He talked to him, the old lady. She went in the bedroom, come out with money, give him money to it, and I wrote her out a receipt for it. And I said, mister, I said, instead of you going out there and cutting wood, I said, why don't you buy it? She looked at me kind of funny. He said, you mean to say I can buy her that? I said, how much do you want? Well, he said, I'd like to have 40 cords. I said, all right. I said, we'll just make you out a bill of sale for 40 cords. You can pay me the snuffage for it. And I said, I'll send it in. And I said, don't you cut another stick of wood until that permit comes back to you. And I said, when you get it done, I said, you pile it up. And I said, you call Moose Lake and tell him you want a scale. Okay. So it went on about 10 days, 2 weeks. Phone rang one night, and it was the boss from Moose Lake. He says, what are you doing? I said, not much of anything. I said, you got a little slash to take care of. Why? He says, can you go over to the East Lake country there, or Waller country? He said, and scale up that pulpwood job. I said, well, hell, I said, what's the matter with, what's his name at Sandy Lake? Well, he said, his friend called him, I don't mention his name, but he said, you want a scale? Well, he sent the guy down Moose Lake. Oh, I don't want him down here at all. He said, you that nice ranger from Aitkin. I just thought I'd crack. I'm still that right there. He said, that nice ranger from Aitkin. I got one more damn friends down that country. I got more friends in that Finn country than any other ranger they ever had, and I think I picked up more people for Christmas down there than any of the other guys.
Do you have any enemies in the county here?
What?
Do you have any enemies?
I don't know. I might have some.
I don't believe you do.
But you know, the funny thing about it, I could get along with the Finns. The other people couldn't. We didn't have one ranger in the district that could get along in the Finn country. And I could get over there and get along with them and talk with them and visit with them and sell timber to them and this and that and one thing. Never had a bite of trouble with them. If they had troubles, God, they'd come into the office and want to know something about it, you know. But I admire the Finn people. I don't give it very much. One thing about them, no fires.
Yeah.
Never have any fires in Finn country.
Is that right?
You know? They don't believe in burning. You know, that stuff growing up there, that's money in their pocket. That's the way they look at it.
How many years did you have in with the forestry altogether, Herman, before you retired?
6 months.
41 years and 6 months. During those 41 years and 6 months, you raised a family here in Aitkin?
Right. Yeah, I raised my family here in Aitkin. They all went through high school here.
Can you tell me their names as they came and, you know, about when they were born and all of that?
Let's see.
Just close. You don't have to be right to the day.
Helen was born in 1924. Again, I don't know where that damn book is. Years old. But Hazel is the second one, and she's 59. Alice is 56, and JoJo is 51.
So you had 4 girls in all together.
Yeah.
And they all went to school here in Aitkin.
All graduated from Aitkin High School.
And you've lived in this house most of the time you were...
I've been living in this house for over 67 years.
67 years. Pretty good length of time. What, other than you're working in the forestry, what did you do on your time off? What did you fish, hunt, or what?
Well, I done a lot of fishing and I done a lot of hunting. And seasons rolled around, and after I retired, then I went to California out there, and I used to do a lot of fishing out there in the Pacific.
That was a little different style of
It's a
fishing.
different style of fishing.
Can you compare the days of like fishing and hunting in the early days to what they are now?
Well, as far as the duck situation is concerned, that's nil. There's nothing.
Yeah.
When I first started hunting ducks, you could go out here any morning early. We'd leave here early and get out and get our decoy set up. Half an hour we'd have our limit, maybe an hour. We'd have a limit of ducks of 12 birds.
That was a big limit.
Yeah. But now I've seen the lakes out here, like Sissebagamah, Hanson Lake. When the bluebill flight was on, there'd be acres and acres of birds sitting out in the middle of the lake. There are all the potholes around here. Of course, they'd raise up there and it'd just be a cloud, you know. At 1919 to about 1927, 28, that's when our big flights were on. There were lots of mallards.
What do you feel was the downfall of the duck population? What caused them to...
Well, I suppose one of the bad features of it was the droughts. Knocked them for a loop in the early 30s. Our duck population went down in the 30s. From 1931 to on 36, that's when our duck populations went down. And they just tumbled.
You're talking about the drought now. What years do they include?
31 to 36.
31 and 36. 236. Can you...
We only included 36.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit about your firefighting and stuff during those days when it was so dry?
We had hundreds of peat fires. 1932 and 34, I had, 32, I had probably 125 or 30 kids around here working. 1934, I had 384. And March 1st in 1932, we had 4,600 peat fires in Aitkin County.
And
March.
Burned all winter?
Well, they burnt in the spring, you know. We had a dry spring, and then all of a sudden they burnt all the meadows, you know. And of course, then everything was dry and the peat got. On March 8th, we got about 10, 11 inches of the wettest doggone snow you ever saw. You could hardly drive a car through it. It took about 55% of our fires.
All these statistics that you're telling me, how do you keep them in your head for so many years? I can't sometimes remember what day it is, and you seem to be quote days, times, and
it seems it's just natural. They're there. They're there to stay, I guess. What happened yesterday or the day before, that's blank. Not anything that happened years ago. Of course, that pretty well set up.
Can you? Do you recall any hardships you had during the Depression or the drought, you know, as a family man or as a forest ranger? Can you tell us a little bit of what life was like?
It was about normal for us. Of course, things you had to pinch on everything was, you know, certain things were hard to get, like sugar and coffee and lard and stuff like that. And my wife, she made donuts for the shack down here, you know, at that time. Well, they gave her a dang big handout for sugar and lard and stuff, flour and stuff like that to keep our business going. But otherwise, we didn't have any trouble as far as that goes. We had, in those days, we always used to have a big garden out here, you know, this vacant lot just north here.
Ask them about cranberries and blueberries, how you find those.
Well,
how about when you were looking around the woods, cranberries and blueberries were quite plentiful in them days?
Not really, as there was times there when we had good crops, and other times there were just, might say, there wasn't any. I remember one time up north of Blind Lake, there was a little moss bog in there, about 3 acres in it. I went through there one time along about this time of year, a little earlier than this. I walked across there and the ground was just covered with cranberries, and nice great big ones, you know. And then there's a lake up north there, the cranberries around that, all these cranberries around it. And I thought to myself, boy, I'll wait till about 5th or 6th of September and take a pail and come up here and get me a couple pails of cranberries. So I went along 10 days or so, and I went up there again, and I took a pail with me. I'll bet you there wasn't a quart of cranberries left in that whole cockeyed thing. And got looking around there, and all I could see was deer tracks punched in the moss and bear tracks. They just cleaned that whole thing. There wasn't enough cranberries there to even make a dish of just sauce. I don't know, they cleaned everything out of there.
On food articles, can you remember the prices of things compared to what today, like a pound of hamburger or a pound of sugar or a loaf of bread?
2 pounds of hamburger for a quarter. You could buy a ring of bologna for a dime. And you could buy steak for about 20 cents, 25 cents a pound, good steak. And now it's $2.50, $3 a pound, of course. But sugar was quite reasonable, about 5 cents. And coffee was probably, well, depending on what kind you got. You know, it went anywhere from 20 cents a pound to 45 cents a pound, depending on what kind of coffee you bought. Some of the higher class of coffees is around 45 cents a pound. But otherwise,
things were a little bit. What kind of wages were you getting an hour then back in those days?
You know, I started out working for $60 a month.
$60 a month and walking 25 miles a day.
Then the next year I got 70, and the next year I got 75, and the next year 80, and so on up till I hit 110. That was tops up till about 1936 or 7. Then I happened to be in the hardware down here. What's his name? He used to have the hardware here as a representative. Oh, he's died here a few years ago. Huh?
Ekman?
Yeah. I come in there one day, and he was back at the desk. He hollered at me, and he said, "I want to talk to you." So I went back and we talked to him. He said, "How do you make a living?" I says, "We don't," but I says, "We get by." Well, he said, "I've been checking up," he said, "on you guys' salaries down there." He says, "I think we're going to do something about that this fall." But I got to jump me from 110 to 137.50 by the next fall, July 1st. So from there on up, they kept going. Now those same guys are getting $12,000 a year.
Or better.
Yeah. Well, the other tops are going up there across the top of the lines, getting over $50,000 a year. You said something about the river. As far as I know, the last boat that ever went upriver was in June in 1916, during the flood.
Okay. How about these log rafts that they come down the river, like the Waldick there in Palisade and...
well, there was a lot of them. We used to have a big landing down here at the mouth of Mud River. The railroad track went down there, you know, and they pulled in there, and they put in chains down there, and they pull that stuff up and load it right on the cars right there. And use logs and
how far north did these logs come from up the river?
Oh, Shovel Lake.
Shovel Lake?
Up above Shovel Lake. Up way up on the Big Willow. They all came down the Big Willow.
And then into the Mississippi?
Into the Mississippi. There was a lot of stuff came down the Mississippi too, but I don't know just where that came from. Probably as far up as Jacobson. I don't know.
At the mill there, did they have a mill right there at the landing then?
No, everything was shipped out by train.
The logs were loaded on a train and shipped out?
On cars and shipped out. The only mill they had here was Poston Brothers down here, right where the Deerwood Lumber Company yard is now.
What did they...
Poston's had a mill there.
What did they saw out there? What did they make?
Well, you mean the Postons?
Yeah.
They were sawing deadheads. They were pulling deadheads out of the river there. They went all the way up to Palisade, even above Palisade. They had two big pontoon rigs there, about 60 feet long. They were up there and pulled those deadheads up.
Wasn't there a barrel stave factory here?
That was out where Earl Fairchild lived.
Okay.
There was barrel liners and barrel staves. That was Osterhout's mill.
And the heading mill.
Huh?
What did the heading mill?
And the heading mill. Then they had the big heading mill there. You know, they sold barrel heads there. You know, they sold and godly a lot of stuff out.
But that was all the lumber come out of the timber come out of the river, come down.
Most
the
of
river.
it, a lot of that came out of the river. A lot of it was hauled in from locally here. They even used to have what they called a stave set up here. They used to make barrel staves out of black ash. There's several different parties around here. You get those black ash logs and split them and split the barrel staves out of them.
That was really the biggest industry around here in those days. Was logging.
Logging, yeah, logging was a big thing. Well, dairying was big too at that time.
You know, I've seen pictures in my time of them hauling humongous loads of logs on a sled on an ice sledway with a team of horses pulling it.
Ice roads.
Tell us a little bit about that and the size of them loads and stuff.
I loaded in the woods up there in at one time, and I think probably the biggest load of logs I ever sent down on ice was 15,000. Normally about 8,000-9,000 on 4 horses.
Board feet.
Huh?
Board feet.
Yeah. And the sleighs are set at 8'6" run, and the bunks on there were 16 foot. And some of them were called stake sleighs. They had what they call stake sleighs, and then the others the chains on what they call the corner binds. You've heard of them. And so you could load a stake sleigh load pretty doggone fast, you know, because but when you put them up with the chains, you had to balance that load just perfect. You could stand on top there and you could rock the whole load. If you got it on one side, you were done. They couldn't get you to jump the ruts in this slow, you know, and take for the woods. So you had to bind, you know. But
How did you load that timber?
Huh?
How did you load those loads?
Your load with a jammer.
Run by horsepower?
Horsepower. Just a cable, hooks on there, big 35-foot leads coming up there, you know, like that, and it was up there. The cable went down, and had a load, hook a beam on it, pulled it back, and it had guys there, 2 hookers, one on each side, chain, and small stuff, they just wrap 5 or 6 logs in a bunch and pull them up there. But when they get a big one, well, then that was something.
And there was no power saws or anything in those days?
Not in those days, it was all crosscut.
1 man or 2 men?
2 man crosscuts on logs, and pulpwood was a 1 man. Then they finally came out with a Swede saw. They had the 1 man saws that they're straight with, and then that Swede saw finally came out. Well, that was the top of the line. Well, they could really cut pulpwood with that thing.
Did you ever spend any time in those logging camps? Or?
Well, I spent a lot of time in logging camps.
What was life like in the logging camps?
Great.
Describe it a little bit.
You probably have heard about poor food and poor conditions. Well, of course, the bunk rooms there wasn't anything fancy or hot about them, but you either had hay in your bunk or cedar boughs or something. Then you had your blankets. You didn't have any mattresses. But then, like your kitchens, cripes so many, you had anything you wanted to eat. I worked in one camp where I don't think I ever sat down to a meal there, but there was at least 5 different kinds of meat on the table. And potatoes, and peas, corn, and all kinds of desserts. Huh?
The reason they had that good food years before that, the lumber camp that didn't feed good didn't have no men.
They didn't have any men, that was right. If they didn't feed good, men didn't stay. And this general rule, you get a good camp, and the same guys would come back every year.
Each camp had their own cook, or did everybody take a turn cooking?
No. They hired their cooks. We used to get these hotel and restaurant cooks out of Duluth in the winter when the business was poor up there. So they'd drift into the woods and cook in the camps. And they had some wonderful cooks.
Good pay.
Yeah. And the general rule, the big camps, the last camp I was in was 200-man camp. They had a cook that did nothing but cook meat. Another cooked the vegetables. Next guy done all the baking. Pies, bread, stuff like that.
The cookie, that was the cook's helper.
And then they had the cookies, of course, the cook's helpers, and the cookies that always waited table, about 5 or 6 of those in there at mealtime, you know. And you could go in any time you wanted to. We used to load the logs out in the woods and be waiting for return sleighs or something like that. Heck, we just hopped into camp, grab a cup of coffee or a donut or anything we wanted, or a sandwich, whatever you want, grab it, go back out and load another load of logs.
Also, they said during the mealtime, nobody had any conversation or anything like that. They just went in and ate and went out again. They didn't.
The only voice you would hear in the mealtime in there was somebody, please pass the potatoes, or please pass the meat down here. That's the only words you'd ever hear at the meal. The old cook, when he's standing back there with butcher knives stuck up the table, he'd go riding herd on him. You didn't no talking at the meals.
What was the reason for that?
Well, if you let them sit there and talk, it'd take an hour or more for them to eat. They'd feed those 200 guys there in less than 40 minutes.
That's right.
In other words, they didn't want to waste any time feeding you. They wanted you out in the woods working.
Back out to work. Well, of course, you kill time coming in to eat, and you kill time getting back out to the job you were on. And normally it took us an hour and a half, an hour and 3/4 from the time we hiked into camp and got our dinners and went back out to the job again.
How long a day did you generally put in from when to when?
Oh, it depended. Teamsters used to get up about 5 o'clock in the morning and take care of the horses, and they were on the road by 6:30, 6:45, and we were in the woods before 7. So as we'd figured we'd leaving camp by 7 to get back into the woods. It all depends on how much of a job we had ahead of us. But if we had to, a lot of times we'd have to load sleighs till maybe 6:30, sometimes like that, but not any later than that.
Did you get paid by the piece or by the hour or by the week, or what kind of wages did you get?
Well, you run for anywhere from $30 a month to $45.
Plus your room and board.
Yeah. And then on top of that, I worked up there. I started work for this one big camp. Started in at $30 a month. And went out there loading, and one of the guys that was top loading on sleighs got his ankle crushed. And the boss came around, and does anybody around here know anything about top loading? Nobody said anything, and I said, I've loaded a few loads, but I said, I'm not no expert at it. Well, he said, finish that load there and see what you can do with it. And I talked to him. He said, you better stay where you're at. He said, looks all right to me.
What did he do about the guy that crushed ankle? What become of him?
Took him out down to the hospital.
Took him down.
Yeah, they said.
Hospital where?
God, I don't know where they took him to.
There was no hospital in Aitkin then?
No, they weren't even near Aitkin. I was clear up in the border country.
Oh.
Yeah. They might have taken him into Duluth for all I know. But then the old man came back a couple of days later, and I was loading, and he said, what are they paying you? And I said, $30 a month. Well, from now on, you're drawing 45. So that helped.
Good boss.
Yeah. He was a scrappy old cuss. Hayway O'Connell, Deer River.
Were you ever on any of the boats on the river that came down? You never had anything to do with those?
Too young yet.
That was before my time when they had the boats on the
That
river.
was before your time.
Yeah. The thing about it, what they should do with this 1918 stuff is type it up and run it first part of October.
Yeah.
There's a history of the 1918 fires.
You, in your later years here at Aitkin, you were a member of the Aitkin Fire Department.
Oh, yes.
You were one of the founders almost, weren't you not?
Well, just about, but I wasn't a member until 1944. I worked with them the day they got the 1924 truck. Run that through its tests.
Do you remember when the hotel burnt down here? Were you around here then? I don't know what year that would have been, and they had the pump right in the river, and the guys were standing in the river pumping water.
Which hotel is that?
I think it was a Foley Hotel right down by Ripple River, I think.
Well, that was before my time here.
Okay,
That was when they had the old hand pumps, you know.
Yeah.
At that time, in the early days, you know, right in the middle of Main Street down here where the two highways cross.
Yeah.
That was where their big well was, right in the middle of the street there.
That's why the street still sinks there every once
That's
in a while.
right. It still sinks there. Yeah, that was their water supply.
Okay.
Is there anything more, Herman, that you'd like to add to your history?
I don't know offhand.
You're leaving for California soon now?
I'll be in California 6th of September. I'm going to Dallas for Richardson for a week or so, and then I'll take off from there.
You figure to come back here in the summer times again?
I don't know what's going to happen. So I don't look forward to the next year ahead at all, not what's going to happen or anything
one
else.
Day at a time.
Yeah, one of the most comical things I ever had that happened was up here towards Blind Lake, and the Blind Lake ditches there. I come down from Blind Lake across the swamp there, and the beaver ponds are in the little ditch there, and I couldn't get across. So I had to follow around till I come to Little Popple Island there, and the water was about, probably that wide. I jumped across it. The damn bank was all washed down. It was just about straight up and down on that wall, and just about as high, and me on my hands and knees crawling up over the top of that bank. Just as I stuck my head over the top of the bank, here comes that damn 3/4 grown black bear. He come up on the bank at the same time. He just stuck his foot out, and we could have shook hands. The 3rd of October, we had a lightning storm here in Aitkin. And 62 strikes in 32 minutes. And one of them hit the Spencer Bog up here. And the wind was blowing a regular hurricane there. In 3 hours, that fire was pretty near Rice River for 4,200 acres in about 3 hours. And it dried dead grass. We tied that up by noon the next day.
30, was that 38?
Huh? 38. And we had one fire southeast of town, or southwest of town here, burned about 5 acres. We had 2 up in the Blind Lake area there, and 1 in Aitkin Township over there, right across, practically across from Chuck's shops. That burned about 7 and 9 acres.
I went up on that one.
And then they had one up in 27 up there. That burned about 5 acres. We got those corralled, but this one up here went off so damn fast nobody could get ahead of it.
When did they start using the towers, Herman?
Well, I think I built the first tower up at Swatera out of some big cedar poles in 19.
Is that White Elk?
No, up south. You know where the old gravel pit used to be, south of Swatera?
Basically, yeah.
On top of that big hill?
Mm-hmm.
That's where we built that tower. We built it out of cedar poles there. And that was in 1928 or 29. I built that thing.
Did you man the tower yourself, or?
No, we didn't hire somebody to man towers. Then we built
What did you have for communications from the towers?
telephones.
Just telephone?
Yeah. And we built first tower we built here. We built right here south side of town. And then we tore that one down and sent that up north, and they brought me in a 100-foot tower, and I took that out to Glen. We built the CCs built that out there. They built the footings for it, and we built the tower. And then we built the Sandy Lake Tower. That was the first tower we built there, was a wooden tower. And that was in about 25 or 26 that we built that. And I built the cabin up there, and then we built the tower. Then we built a warehouse later on up there. And then a few years later, then they sent us up a steel tower, a 100-foot steel tower, so we built that up there at Sandy Lake. And then later on, when we built the one here at Aitkin, I moved from Aitkin to Hill City and built that tower in Hill City. And that was in the 1920s.
The tower system was a very good system, wasn't it? The tower system worked out real successful.
Worked real good, except when you get foggy weather or you get the goddamn country full of smoke. A lot of times, you know how it is here in the fall, it gets hazy, you can't see, you know. But you got to guess at something. If fire boils up, if the black smoke comes up, then you know you got a fire. But then otherwise, they can lay there smoke and smolder, you know. And that's like in 36. They had the big fire north of Hoagland, up there on the border. It's 84 miles around the fire line. And that burnt in there for weeks. Nobody knew it was in there because they had so dang many fires on the Canadian side, and the smoke was drifting down there. And towers or nothing was no good to them. They couldn't see anything. When they did find it, somebody happened to go up that old trail up there, and everything was burning, and they came down. And we had the same time I had that 12,000-acre fire out down here by Arthite. And Grover Consett was a big shot in the Forestry Service at that time. And he was up there, and we had that under control. And he said, you better go home, he said, and pack a bag. He said, you can go up to Hoagland and go onto that fire up there. And I said, well, and I said, okay. And I got home and the next day it was raining. Beat the band. I go home. So that tied that deal up.
Those towers are still in use today, are they not?
Oh yes, they were using them.
They have a little more sophisticated equipment in them now?
Radios nowadays. Everything is radio in them now.
Otherwise, the spotting is still the same.
Well, you still got your cross shots, triangulation they call it.
Yeah.
You know, you can spot a fire awful doggone close, I'll tell you.
Close to the 40.
Yeah. I used to have a towerman there, old Bill Christensen, you all remember him. Take his 6-pack of beer up there and his lunch, he'd sit there. He's sitting there in the afternoon, the phone ring, and say, you got a fire over here, such and such a place. He says, I think it's in section so-and-so. Jesus, I go to section so-and-so, that's where the fire was. He hadn't even crossed the end. He knew the country just like the back of his hand, you know. He'd traveled over so much, you know, peddling that doggone coffee and stuff that he used to peddle.
Yeah.
When you responded to a fire back in those days, what did you have for equipment?
Just my pickup and a few pump tanks and shovels.
It wasn't a 4-wheel drive pickup either, was it?
No, you didn't have any 4-wheel drives. You had to scratch gravel to even get a pickup. For years, I didn't have any trucks you were using. I used my car, you know, after years there. And all we had to fight fire was those damn pump tanks.
Yeah.
Did you ever find one that fit your back?
Well, not really. But those later ones that we got there, they had the ventilation bar on them, you know, they worked out pretty good. You didn't get wet. The others, Christ, you'd be soaking wet. Every time you bend over, there'd be a stream of water running down the back of your neck.
The state during the fire season would put on extra men like they do now?
Yeah, not necessarily. We'd probably put on maybe 1 or 2, and that'd be the sum total. And now you can put on half a dozen or a dozen if you want to. The last few years I worked there, I had usually 6 or 8 guys. I run 3 crews out of the office down here on the spring and fall fires, and I could keep them busy.
What do you think about these bombers fighting fire in helicopters?
I think they're a damn big expense.
For what they're getting out of
For
it.
what they get. The thing of it is, the only fault behind them, they don't have enough of them. If they had enough of them so that this one come in, the one right behind him, and keep right on going, they'd do something. But when he comes in, he drops his load, he's got to go for half, 3/4 of an hour loading the same way as your helicopter. By the time he gets back, your fire's running for another 1/4 of a mile, you know. So you're not gaining too much. You've got a good hand crew. I used to tell them I'd take one of those old firefighting crews of mine and I'd put out a fire quicker than they could think of it. I was so proud of that bunch I had, those kids. You can say they were kids, 18 to 21 years old. They could put out more doggone fire today than these guys with their equipment.
Yeah. That's probably true, all right.
Then we finally got the plows and the bulldozers, and that was a big help. That gave us something to back up on. But I've seen the time there when I'd on a bad fire, I'd have to back up from a half to a mile in order to burn in a fire break with a backfire fire break in there. Now you don't dare to set a fire break; you're setting one up, and it's just like here. A couple of years ago, they had one up in the bog up here, and Bill Cook, backfired the damn thing across there and put the fire out. And Jesus, they were going to arrest him for letting the backfire. He put the dang fire out.
That's right. Yeah.
No, I'll tell you, you get a big fire. I'm telling you, you got to go to a backfire. I don't care what anybody says.
They don't always agree with that, though. But not like these big fires out west in Yellowstone Park and that. They say that park is going to come back better now than it ever was before, or
well,
good or better.
It'll come back. As far as being better concerned, it might be less dead timber and stuff laying on the ground. But the thing of it is, it's going to be 50, 60 years before it's back.
Do you believe in the theory of letting Mother Nature take its course?
Not the way they do.
No.
I maintain they get a fire back in there, put the darn thing out, and then let nature reseed the burn. Now you take that, you got over 1 million acres there that's burnt. It's going to take anywhere from 45 to 60 years before that's going to be back in circulation again. That's the same way with all that country. It's just like they had a fire down there where Helen lives, or they had it down there, I suppose, and everything's still burning. I don't know, I haven't heard anything more about it. And it's over the east side of the mountain from her. And it's in a dry brush area there. They haven't had a fire for 100 years. It's crumbling up the side of the mountain there.
That's one theory. They say if they'd have more fires, burn out more fires, like Herman used to come out, and if I didn't burn off the patch for quite a while, he'd come out in the spring and we'd burn it off. Periodically we'd burn it off. You don't have so much dead stuff when you do it.
Well, I still maintain that they're not doing the right thing. They should burn these cockeyed meadows every spring just as soon as the snow gets out of the grass, and then we'd have our sharp-tailed grouse back, and we'd have probably eventually maybe prairie chickens would come back into this country. We used to have lots of prairie chickens up here north of town, out here in the Spencer Bog. Now we've got a couple of small flocks out here in the Spencer Bog, and we've got a couple up north of town, maybe 30, 40 birds in a bunch, that's all. Yeah, we used to have them up there by the hundreds. I've seen time up there in the wintertime, and that bug brush up there, the Arctic birch they call it, that'd be 500, 600 of those birds in there in a bunch.
Yeah, we used to see huge flocks during the winter. During the winter, we'd see huge flocks.
And I still maintain that they burn those doggone meadows and give them a nest place. They won't nest in that doggone dead grass.
No.
It seems that's true.
You go up there right now, like this nesting season this last spring. If you found any nests at all, you found them right in the edge of the swamp up there, right in the edge of the blueberry bog, going in the south of the spruce swamp. There was a few nests in there, but out in the grass there wasn't a nest.
Well, Herman, thank you for your information and the history of the country here, and I wish you a lot of luck in your trip out west, and hope you enjoy your stay out there in the sunny California.
I'll be back to work when I get out there.